The UN's approach in this space, I think, is still very new. It was only in 2000 that the United Nations Security Council passed the first resolution on women, peace and security. And so while 12 years have now passed, in terms of history and in terms of violence in this space around conflict, the UN's really focused, targeted work has only really, kind of getting started. The resolution outlines essentially 4 key priorities for conflict prevention, but also the protection of women in conflict. And they are focusing around women's representation in both peace building and post-conflict situations, the protection of women, the participation of women, and the response post-conflict. And what tends to happen in a lot of conversations about women's experience of conflict and of violence is that the debate very quickly becomes about protection. How do we protect women who are experiencing violence in conflict? And while that is absolutely essential to the work that UN Women does, working with both NGO partners and local community partners and also with national governments, the piece that's really missing in the debate and the piece that UN Women's really focusing on at the moment is around participation. And how do we actually get to a point where women are actively involved in all levels of peace negotiations and peace building? And just to give you a bit of a picture, over probably the last 10 to 15 years, women have made up 8% of participants in peace talks and peace negotiations. And they've made up only 3% of signatories. So you can see that when conflict happens and when conflict starts to be resolved, women's voices are actually not included in those processes. And it's very clear to me why that would be important. But just to think about the role that women play in communities, and particularly have played through conflict, where they might be working and contributing to the formal economy, they'd be caring for their family, caring for their own children, but also often bearing a double burden that conflict brings, which might be caring for other children, orphans, might be caring for sick relatives and elderly people who haven't been able to care for themselves. So women are actually bearing this incredible burden, but also experiencing what it's needed in the post-conflict phases. So they often have very good understandings of what's needed around healthcare, around education, around community building and around justice. And so not having their voices involved in these processes is really damaging. So the UN really focuses its work at the global level on the implementation of the Security Council's resolution in those 4 areas, working with both member states at a national level around implementation, and Australia has recently developed what they call a national action plan in this space, which is aimed at ensuring that the Australian response in conflict and post-conflict situations puts women at the front and centre of all of the aspects of Australian engagement, right through to working with local community organisations in regional areas that are starting this process, working with women.